Addiction, more than a substance. Much of the research for this speech has come from Dr. Broswick's Drugs and Human Behavior class, the material I've been exposed to, as well as in class, as well as Dr. Amen's book, Unchain Your Brain, and some of my own personal struggles with addiction. How do people get hooked on a substance, whether legal or illegal? If people are compared with the vervet monkeys on the island of St. Kitts, it is arguable that people are genetically predisposed to addiction. These monkeys, based on their history, are essentially alcoholics, and they're quite humorous to watch. But if heavy drinking runs in one's genetic background, it is possible that a person could develop an addiction to alcohol. Aside from predisposition, there are various other factors, and the most important is brain function. The way we treat our brain determines how our brains will treat us. Everything we consume, whether it be food, beverage, alcohol, legal and or illegal drugs, cigarettes, etc., our daily activities all affect our brain, and that in turn affects how we act. The prefrontal cortex is our commander-in-chief. When we're young, we don't have a strong PFC. Our brains will learn from experience if they're treated with care at a young age. Parents need to pay attention to what I'm saying. Their own behavior, what they do, how they treat their children or do not treat their children, what they feed or do not feed their children, what they do and do not discuss with their children, all affects the prefrontal cortex. According to Dr. Amen, adolescents typically have less efficient activity in the PFC because this part of the brain isn't fully developed until the age of 25. Until the age of 25, the brain is undergoing a process called myelinization, in which a protective substance called myelin wraps around the brain's neurons, helping the brain's nerve cells work up to 10 to 100 times more efficiently. If neglected teenagers or teenagers from broken homes start to use drugs to take the edge off at a young age, they're doing serious harm to themselves because their brains aren't fully developed yet. While I didn't come from a broken home, I started drinking coffee at the age of 13. I liked it. I started drinking heavily at the age of 19. I also started experimenting with tobacco, marijuana, alcohol, and hallucinogens between the ages of 17 and 24. While I sparingly used hallucinogens, I started drinking very heavily. Once I turned 21, it became an addiction because it was so easily accessible. I'd wake up thinking about drinking. I'd often wake up thinking about giving up drinking. I'd exhausted most of my funds, would spend most of my paycheck on alcohol. I would be frequently late with rent. I had no savings account, yet I still continued to drink. I also had a few near-death experiences between 2004 and 2010, one of which was a final wake-up call and luckily not a coffin. In hindsight, if I ate healthier and exercised more as a child than a preteen, perhaps my addictions would have never kicked into full gear. I'd often raid the refrigerator and pantry for the sweetest snacks after school. I was young and my metabolism helped me from gaining the weight, but my emotional brain ran my life. It eventually got to the point where I wouldn't even fight cravings as a young adult, letting my limbic system and basal ganglia completely take over. I had no supervisor. I do now. I exercise and I eat healthier. My prefrontal cortex has better function. It could be better, but it's better than it was. While I was drinking heavily, I religiously followed Dr. Amen's 4 C's: craving, compulsion, loss of control, and continued use in spite of consequences. Why do people continue to use, and why do people relapse? It's never too late to get sober, but it's hard, really, really difficult for an addict to resist a relapse. Heroin addicts suffer a rough withdrawal, making them feel sick. So they continue to use in spite of the consequences. They could be selling their bodies out in the street. They could have exhausted everything, lost their families. But yet they're still using in spite of the consequences. They don't want to feel that sick. Meth addicts, they experience extreme depression once they've beaten withdrawal because of the dopamine rush that methamphetamine gave them. It became so salient to the brain in terms of pleasure. One recovered meth addict that we studied in Dr. Broswick's class mentioned that it takes the brain 6 months to 1 year to generate dopamine on its own, making a relapse extremely difficult to resist. So catch it before it happens. Drugs play with dopamine, serotonin, GABA, and endorphins. If used right and your brain is healthy, these chemicals can give you natural highs. Healthy eating. Avoid fast food. Limit foods that are high in fat and sugar. Eat fruits, vegetables. Drink green tea with limited amounts of caffeine. Exercise. This will keep dopamine levels healthy, allowing one to stay focused. Also, exercise. It allows one tryptophan to get to the brain faster than other proteins. That allows healthy serotonin levels. Eating foods and drinking things that are high in glutamic acid, such as raw spinach, oats, green tea, lentils, magnesium supplements, vitamin B supplements, all those things help increase healthy GABA function. Eat a small amount of chocolate every day to bring your brain natural pleasure. According to Dr. Raymond, cocoa has been shown to increase endorphin production in the brain. Engage in healthy activities such as exercise. Learn a musical instrument. Get educated. Go to school for something that you're passionate about. It'll increase healthy brain activity, especially when a person applies what they've learned. It is okay to get hooked on healthy brain activities, and doing so keeps the brain distracted from relapse. Cravings are easily stifled when one's PFC can calm the limbic system without a struggle. The methadone program, it keeps heroin addicts addicted because it offers one solution. It doesn't consider the person's psychological addiction. If an addict makes it through withdrawal cold turkey, he has to deal with the depression and the cravings. But in an inpatient rehab, he could be forced to stimulate healthy brain function with proper diet and exercise. Rehabilitation is to be a process where one learns his or her brain and how to take control of it, not a process where one person trades one addiction for the next. So be proactive. Parents need to consider their own behaviors and how their own behaviors affect their children. Make sure to have that conversation about drugs and alcohol, and be sure to include inhalants. Have that conversation before they reach an experimental age that most adolescents reach. Rather than drugs or alcohol, a teenager may get hooked on playing sports, academics, making music, dating, all of which are activities that promote healthy brain function, just as long as no serious head injuries are sustained. Give them the tools to have a healthy brain, so that by the time the myelin is fully developed, they have a very, very strong prefrontal cortex.